Hi, we'll be doing a full body stretch starting with the calves, and then we're gonna move through the whole body. Start with the calves by placing your heel behind the balls of your foot and keep your legs straight, keep your back straight, lifting your chest up, supporting your back with your arms. And as you are in this position, try to be pushing down with your heel onto your stretching foot. So obviously you should be feeling that stretch behind the back of your shin, and hold that stretch for 30 to 40 seconds before switching over to the other side. If your leg is fully extended, you can increase the stretch by just slightly leaning forward without rounding your back though, so make sure that you're pushing your chest towards your knees. And then we're going to be moving on to a hamstring stretch. From there, keep your both legs straight, keep your hands really close to your hips so that you can extend your arms and lift your chest and sit with a really good posture. Again, to increase the stretch, you can try to lean forward with your chest without bending your back. Again, you can readjust the position by walking the hands slightly closer to your hips and just pushing your body forward towards your knees. Also, if you point your toes towards yourself, you can feel an increase in the stretch. However, if you feel any tingling in the legs, then avoid doing that. Just relax your foot. Okay, so the next one will be an adductor stretch. So the muscles on the inside of your thighs, place your feet together and pull your feet as close to yourself as possible. Again, try to lift your chest and sit with a good posture. There will be also another adductor stretch beyond this, so if you don't feel comfortable in this position, don't worry about it too much. And if you can cross your legs, that's perhaps easier to hold, but not everybody finds it comfortable on their knees, so just go with what you can do. At this point, you can increase the stretch by pushing on one knee at a time. Again, use your other arm as a support for your back. Good. We're moving on to the next adductor stretch, which is a bit more dynamic. So you will be sitting with your feet together, and you're gonna place your elbows on the inside of your thighs. You breathe in, lift your knees, and then as you breathe out, you push your knees towards the floor. Again, you want to be focusing on your back, keeping your back as straight as possible. And breathe out, push the knees towards the floor. You're going to do it a couple more times. Breathe in and push, breathe out. Very good. You can sort of tilt from rock from side to side. And be moving into the next stretch, which is a glute stretch. So you're gonna pull your foot as high as you can, and try to hug your knee and use your other arm to give you a good support. Again, you want to keep your back straight by lifting your chest nice and high, and as you're pulling your knee towards your shoulder, you will also want to try to twist in the same direction to increase the stretch. This is a little bit more tiring one because you obviously have to work pretty hard to get a good stretch in the hips and the glutes by pulling the knee and holding yourself in that position. And it's gonna be same for the other side. Again, you might find that one side is tighter than the other, so again, feel free to in your own time to spend a bit more time on that side, and then every time you do this stretch or any of the stretches for that matter, if one side is tighter, then you can do two sets, starting with the tight side and finishing with the tight side. If by the way this position is too hard and you find it difficult to reach your knee with your elbow, you can also use your hand, and you just have to be a bit more mindful of pulling your knee towards your shoulder. It's easier to reach but harder work. Okay, next one, we're still working on the hips. A lot of the lower back issues that we experience nowadays is due to the fact that we lose flexibility of the hip muscles and the thighs and anything that crosses the hips, and because of that, when we are bending forward, we have to compromise, and instead of a good healthy squat, you will be more likely to bend your back and strain the muscles and ligaments. Okay, next one, after rocking side to side, you can do this mobility test or exercise where you just push your feet down a couple of times, and you might find that one side feels like it's just gonna jar or click, and if it does, that's okay. You might also find that if you look up at your knees, one knee is gonna be higher than the other, and it won't fall to the floor as close to the floor. You can do that 2 to 3 times, and still working on the hips. The next one is going to be pulling your knee towards your chest. So ideally, again, you would be hugging your knee, but if you've got tight muscles, then you might find it difficult to reach it with your get your elbow close to your knee. So you can again use your hand to pull your knee towards your chest. And you're going to do the other side as well. Same thing. I like to use the opposite side or the opposite arm for the reaching for the knee. And then that way I can kind of pull the knee towards the midline of the body and get a bit more stretch that way. And finally we're gonna try to hug and bring both knees closer to the chest. You can't really see it on the camera, but I'm trying to keep my lower back and also my head on the floor at the same time. So because I'm tight in the hips, I'm not able to hug my knees, but I'm still working hard to pull my knees to my chest. So if you cannot hug your knees without having to like bend your neck backwards or lift your lower back off the floor, then just use your hands to be in this position. We're also going to be in a different position in a few minutes, where you are actually putting your whole body weight onto your knees and your thighs, so you will still get the benefits of this stretch in just a different position. Okay, next one is more of a mobility exercise than a stretch. Some people call it flossing. The nerve in the leg. So it's important to move the head and the foot in the opposite direction at the same time. So imagine that the nerve is running through like a wire running through a pipe, and you don't want to be pulling this wire from both ends at the same time, or even just pulling it from one end and not moving it in the same direction at the same time. This is to avoid any stress on the nerve and inflaming the nerve by accident. So as you drop your foot, you lift your head, try to keep your chin tucked in and mouth closed so you don't strain your neck too much, and it feels a bit more comfortable and natural. So instead of trying to lift your chin towards the ceiling, bring your chin towards the chest. Once you do this on both sides for about 20 also repetitions, 15 to 20 repetitions, you can move on to a perifemoral stretch, and in this case it's going to be the one that I'm sure you've done yourself or seen it at the gym. You're going to grab your knee with your opposite hand and then gently roll over to the other side, keeping both shoulders on the floor. So it's important to keep the shoulder on the floor, so don't let your knee just flop to the side and your back come off the floor completely. You want to have that tension going through the hip muscles, and you might also find you have tension in the obliques, around the rib cage, going up into the chest and the shoulders, and that's perfectly fine. But don't try to pull the knee too hard towards the floor, because at the moment you are rotating and twisting the spine, so you don't want to overdo it. Just use gravity. Just keep your knee in that position and use gravity to do most of the work. I'll show you how to increase that stretch just by extending your knee a little bit, extending your leg, and then you will just have more weight pulling down on the hip muscles. Just hold that stretch for a little bit longer, and again, if you want to increase that stretch, just extend your knee. Try to avoid holding your breath, just breathe naturally. Okay. Very good. And then you can bring your leg back to the middle. Just get back to starting position. And then how you're gonna get up and turn around is roll on your side and push using your arm. Especially if you have any lower back issues, it's always good to, instead of sitting up from bed or off the floor, to get up by rolling to your side and then using your arm. So the next one is just upper back stretch, and in both directions you're gonna flex and extend the spine. So at this point, try to push your hips forward towards your shoulders, and then you breathe in, drop your chest towards the floor, look up, try to lift your head, and then repeat it a few times. Every time you can walk your hand towards your knees to reset the position. And the closer your hands are to your knees, the more pressure you can put on your upper back while stretching it. Okay, next one, sit back on your heels and bring your chest towards the floor. So this is a position called child pose. Again, it's a very common stretch, especially in yoga. And the good thing about this stretch is that it stretches multiple muscle groups. So it stretches your lower back and hips, muscles in the hips, the glutes, the inner thighs, depending on how wide your knees are, your quads as well. And you can also stretch your lats in this position just by walking your hands a little bit further away from your shoulders, and while you're staying in this seated position, and try to get your hips to your heels. If you can't sit back all the way, that's fine. You can flatten your toes if that's comfortable enough. When you're pointing your toes away from your body, just like the way I'm doing it now, I can feel a bit of stretch going through my shin as well as the top of my foot. And then you can relax your arm and just get your head touch your knee, or just be closer to the floor. This is more of a lower back stretch. So I'm going to readjust my position and bring my knees close together, as close as possible, and then get my head as close to my knees as possible, and just relax my arms on the floor. Again, I'm going to rest in this position for a little bit longer, and then if you have any worries about your lower back, then you can skip this and always use your arm to take some pressure of your back by giving that certain position a bit of a help. Just like now, I kind of pushed my chest up and my shoulders up using my arms. Okay, you can just move your spine around a little bit, including the shoulders in this position before we move on to the next stretch, just by moving moving one shoulder up while you're moving the other shoulder down towards the hip, and then bringing your chest towards the floor and pushing your chest away from the floor. You can just mobilize the shoulder blades a little bit and notice any tightness around the top of the shoulders or between the shoulder blades. Okay, the next stretch is going to be for it involves some rotation. So again, in this position, I would suggest everyone to use the opposite arm to actually help you holding that position, so you don't put all that pressure onto your shoulder and your head and neck, but you're actually holding it with your arm. Again, if you hold it for at least 30 seconds before you switch over. Again, I'm using my arm to push up and using my arm to get down to the floor, so supporting my body weight, some of my body weight in my arm. Very good. Let's move on to another position where the idea is to open the knees as much as you can, and then you're going into sort of a variation of a child pose with your knees wide, where the focus is on the groin muscles. And at this point I'm not just stretching my arm forward, in fact I'm pushing myself back into this position. So I'm keeping my arm straight, but I'm not inching with my hands forward, I'm pushing back. And then once I find the widest position, I'll just relax and we're moving on to a mobility exercise where you don't have to be in your widest position. In fact, you want to bring your knees slightly closer together. Most of your weight is going to be carried by your arms, so make sure your elbows are fairly straight. You're lifting your chest, and you can't see it from the camera, this angle, but I'm focusing on not arching my lower back. And at the same time I'm lifting my feet and move them in sort of a semicircle at the same time, just to move that thigh bone, move it around in the socket, and then for one more time and go back, and now hopefully can go into a wider position than you were before. Okay, so this is just going to be a quick stretch for the shoulders, front of the shoulders and the hips. Once you are in this position, you're going to lift your hips as high as you can, lift your chest as high as you can, and then lean back, trying to get the front of the hips to stretch as well. If you're squeezing your glutes, you may be able to lift your hips even higher. And then you stay in the same position to stretch the neck and the shoulders. So you're going to tilt your head, again your arms are straight and palms flat on the floor, supporting your arms supporting your back. And then you tilt your head you can do both sides, going to the left and the right, and then you're gonna also do the front. So when we do the front, I'm still tilting my head to the left, but lift my chin up towards the ceiling, and it's a great stretch for anyone who's not regularly stretching the neck. These muscles get really tight when we spend our days in a seated position staring at a screen. So I love this stretch, just to go around and stretch the neck, both sides in the front. Next one, just gonna transition into a kneeling position and place one hand on the floor and then lean to the side. So it's useful to stay seated with your bum in contact with your heels, and lean out to the side, extending your arm, extending your elbow, making sure you're reaching towards the other side to get a good stretch running down from your shoulders down to your hips. So the next time around, when we repeat this stretch, I'm going to place my hands slightly further back behind my back, not directly behind my foot, but it allows me for me to lean slightly back as well as to the side, and this way I can feel a good stretch going down through my obliques, slightly to the side from my belly button. Good. Quick stretch to pushing the hands forward. You're gonna feel a stretch between the shoulder blades. I don't spend too much time on this stretch because those muscles are usually already pretty long anyway, just from leaning forward in a bad position at a desk. And then opening up the chest in this position by trying to extend my arms as I also lift my hands away from my back. So keep it nice and tight, hands together, and sit with your back as straight as possible. So the next stretch is it's more dynamic in the sense that you're essentially performing a few repetitions of the same movement, following your breathing pace. So you're gonna breathe in, look up, and then as you breathe out, hold your breath, and then as you breathe out, you're gonna lower your chest and the head. What you want to make sure is that you keep your hips flat on the floor. That's why my hands are quite far forward, away from my shoulders. So don't start with your hands under your shoulders. Try and keep it safe for your lower back and start further away from your body. And then if you want to progress the position, if you think you can increase the stretch and lift your chest higher without lifting your hips off the floor or putting too much pressure on your lower back, by all means bring your hands closer to your shoulders. So breathe out on the way down, and then you can breathe in on the way up. If you feel pressure in your lower back, you can right before the next repetition, you could also just squeeze your glutes and sort of support your lower back before you actually lift your chest off the floor. It also feels good just to go into child pose for a few seconds, and that's it. This way you have stretched the whole body from top to toe, and see you soon.